You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, The Voice, Jeff Tucker.
We don't need a reason for anything we feel. We don't need a reason. The castle's at the wheel. So roll this top down, hell with this town, leave our feelings behind. We don't need a reason, 'cause I got you and you got me tonight.
When I started 91 Reasons, it came out of, practically it came out of a New Year's resolution I made to myself for 2014, and that was to start a podcast, to see if I could do it. Could I start a podcast and have enough to say to keep it going? Because that's the thing, right? A lot of podcasts is you discover and you get into them, and then they're gone because the person who was putting it together, either their lifestyle changed, or it became too much of a burden, or they simply ran out of things to say. So I wanted to see if I could do it, if I could come up with enough things to say. And the catalyst, the spark, was the season pass. Doug and Brent and Robert and all the people involved with the season pass, and peripherally Rob Alvey and Rick West, they would come to Knott's Berry Farm, and they would, Doug would set up this elaborate setup, and he would conduct these, one after the other interviews for whatever event it was. And they were there a few times. They were there for West Coast Bash. They were there for Knott's Preserved, but mostly they were there for Halloween Haunt. And originally, the lady who was head of public relations, Jennifer Blasey, was the one directly involved in the podcast, and she would sit and do the interviews with them, and she was very good at it. But for whatever reason, I just really clicked with those guys, and I got the vibe of what they were looking for content wise, and it's no knock to Jennifer, because Jennifer is a seasoned professional speaker, but Jennifer's a lot of things: talented, funny. What she is not is a nerd. She's not a nerd. I'm a big nerd, so the nerd factor is, I think, what sort of tipped the scales as far as when are the season pass guys coming in? Because I should move my days off to be there. And eventually I would just contact them directly and put these big, elaborate recording sessions together with Doug and the gang. And that was starting in 2012. 2012 for Summer and Haunt, putting together these massive shows for them. But originally I was on as a guest, and I just sort of dug back into Doug's season pass archives, because he has all of his shows archived. They're fascinating to listen to. But I went back to my first appearance just to see what it was. And you can tell, I'm trying to be entertaining, but also very aware that I am representing Knott's Berry Farm when I speak, and that I am acting as a spokesperson. And that does affect the way you talk. And you take maybe an extra microsecond to think about what you're going to say. And what happened was, there was an episode, you can look at it, I'm looking at it right now, episode 180, Live at Knott's, 2011, October 17th. That was a weird period for me. I was working on a show called The Wonders of Technology for Halloween Haunt, and it was a big production that I didn't really understand. It was very technical. And the two guys in it, I was merely there trying to help them get this show up on its feet for an audience. But when I walked over, I was there all day for rehearsal, and then I walked over to the Chicken Dinner restaurant in the back room there where they were recording the season pass. And I remember on the way there, vividly. You guys have listened to this show. You know I can remember things. I remember it vividly in my head saying to myself, I'm just going to be me. I'm going to try to let my guard down and just be myself. And I found that I had a lot more fun on the show doing that. It comes across in the interview. I'm really shot out of a cannon right off the bat. And I talk about Wonders of Technology for a bit. I talk about my contribution to the hanging. I do say that Ken Parks is the guy who writes and directs it, and I contribute. That's an important distinction for me personally, but it's not worth getting into at this point. But it just felt really good doing that episode. And then from that point forward, I really looked forward to Doug and the gang coming out to Knott's and doing their show because it gave me a chance to improvise, to reach an audience. And it's weird to think like it took 3 solid years before I would actually, have the idea or the catalyst or the nerve to try to start my own podcast. And like I said, it was my New Year's resolution. I didn't have a title yet. I just knew I wanted to do a podcast where initially it was just going to be movie reviews. Like I would just review the movies that I like. And, if people liked listening to that, that was great. And if they didn't, that's great too. It would just be like a little cathartic thing I would do once a week or once every other week. And I would post these up and, just see what happened and not really have any expectations for the show. So what I did was, because I'm very cheap, I went out and I bought a USB microphone. I bought the Adam Levine Maroon 5 microphone from Target. And I bought it like right when we got our taxes done. So like the second or third week of February, that was that's my version of Columbus setting his ships on fire so that his crew will reach the New World. So I have this microphone sitting on my desk. And you know what? It sat there for a while. It sat there for months. And what I did was I went on Fiverr, and Chris Gore turned me on to this website called Fiverr, Fiverr.com, where you can get creative people who will make stuff for you for $5. So I went ahead and had a logo created, and it didn't cost me $5. It cost me closer to $50 because I could not find a person who would listen to exactly what I wanted. And you don't want to ask for a refund because it's $5. But I'll tell you, by the 9th time, I was like, this guy better get it right or he's going to get the full brunt of me not getting it 9 times in a row. But $50 in, I got it, and it's the logo that I still use today. It's the Back to the Future flavored logo, and I like that. And then I went ahead and I paid a guy $5 to make the theme music for me, and then I paid him another $5 to make the closing music for me. So now I had a logo, I had a title for the show, and I had a theme song, and I had a credit song. But I didn't have any shows yet. And what I had to do was I had to teach myself how to record. And that's not the whole thing. You have to teach yourself how to record and make it worthwhile, make it sound good. And then you have to figure out how to edit it together to make a show. And there were a lot. I mean, if I'd known then how difficult and time consuming it was going to be, it might have thrown me off actually doing it. It might have. I'm pretty persistent though. So that being said, we are on show 91 of the show 91 Reasons. So we're actually on 92, but there is an episode that will never see the light of day. I did a full over an hour on what I listened to on the radio growing up, and the gimmick to that show was I have the phony phone calls that I made to K-Rock back when I was a teenager. And you know what? I'm not proud of them. Listening back, I come off as like a real jerk. So that episode will stay in the vault. Maybe when I decide to end the show, it'll be my last show. Like, it'll be out of order and old, but who cares, right? So I had to teach myself how to record, how to edit, how to put the shows together. And there is a learning curve, because if you listen to the first few episodes, they don't sound very good. They're very low volume, and the bumpers are way too loud. So finally, I finally figured out all this equipment-wise to put the shows together and make them sound good. And but I didn't post any shows. I did 9 or 10 shows before I even thought about putting them up. And the reason why is I thought I was going to have this backlog of shows, and that I would always be 2 or 3 shows ahead. Now that's never been the case. You know, I ate through those initial shows pretty quickly. But no, what happened was I would have to wait until everybody left the house, and I still do for the most part. Sometimes Josie is here, or everybody's asleep at this point. I did record the Batman and Robin episode while everybody was in the house trying to sleep, and they all banned me from doing that. They said, you can never do that again. We had to listen to your whole review from bed, and nobody wants to hear you. So I have to wait until the house is empty to do my shows. And for a guy with a wife and kids, that's not easy. You know, I wish I had a little booth I could step into that was soundproof and just do the show. Because even if Rachel's home and tells me, like, hey, I'll be quiet and you can do the show, I can't do it. Because she's listening. And when and you know, it's not her fault. She's put up with me for 20 plus years. So when I said I was going to do this project, the first thing she said to me was, who wants to listen to you? I said, I don't know. I'm just going to put it out to the world and see what happens. She's like, I've heard your stories a million times. No one wants to hear that. But I didn't listen to that. And I forged ahead. And I forged ahead because I truly believed in the idea of the show, of not only putting this out there to see what happens, but more importantly, and I've said this from the beginning, recording these stories forever and giving them on a flash drive to my kids so that they can, I mean, you listening, you that are my age, older people, what would you give to have 100 hours of your father telling his life stories? Like, I would kill for that. You know, I have his letters, and I'm staring at him right now, and that's on its way, that episode. So I'll be able to convey a little bit of his voice, and more importantly, his thoughts, you know. But I never actually heard my dad speak. I mean, I did, but I don't remember it. So I don't have that. But my kids, darn it, are going to have it. Whether they like it or not, they're going to have hours and hours of dad talking. What are we up to? Almost 4 days worth of nonstop me talking. How? I mean, that's pretty cool, right? It's nerdy, but it's still cool. So I didn't listen when a few people said, that's a terrible idea. My wife didn't think it was a good idea. My friend Daniel told me I had to have a co-host. Like, you can't just sit and do a show by yourself. Why not? You have to have a co-host. I do? Yeah. Why? It's just the way it's done. Well, Daniel, I don't do things the way everybody else does. I make my own path. What did you tell me about my book series? You have to have chapters and... Oh, I don't have chapters. You have to. I do? So I don't listen to rules. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. In the case of this show, I think it's good. I think breaking the rules allows me to have the best of both worlds, because when there's somebody available who wants to sit down and do a show with me, I can do that. If there's nobody around, I can still do a show. I just got to find something to talk about. Somebody just wrote me today and said, he's from England, and he said, I enjoy listening to your shows, and I'm amazed you can talk so long. And I just thought that was great. Like, I was like, that guy gets it. Because I don't know how I can talk so long either. There were a few episodes in the beginning that were half and half. Like, I talked and I took a break and then I came back. But a lot of times now I just I run straight through. So I had this idea to do a show. And for those of you who don't know me personally, I live 35 miles away from my job. So I drive that twice every day, 70 miles round trip. And that would be bad enough. Except that the freeway that I drive is one of the busiest freeways in the nation. Because there's only one major freeway in and out between Riverside, where I live, and Orange County, where I work. And everybody does this commute because we all moved out here because the houses were cheaper. And we thought, to give our kids a life and a house and a bedroom like this, I'll make the drive. Well, I've done it for 6 years now. And it's, you know what, friends? It's killer. It tries your patience. The freeway is killer. And it's where I discovered a lot of the podcasts that I listen to. I discovered Season Pass by being on it. But a lot of podcasts, I just give them a whirl. On iTunes, just subscribe, see what happens. And originally I was doing it with an actual iPod, and I had to, do it with my smartphone like everybody else. My car has Bluetooth. The episodes stream right in. So I had to come up with ways to entertain myself on the freeway. I did it 3 ways. I listened to the radio, I listened to podcasts, and I listened to CDs. And sometimes all at once, like I am just pushing the buttons on all 3 because, either the podcast has run out of steam and it's boring me. There's nothing on the radio musically or talk-wise, and I got to put the CD on, but I've heard those a million. I mean, it's a whole process. So while sitting in this insane traffic, and it really is insane, folks, there have been trips from work to home and from home to work that have lasted 2.5 hours. Like, that's an eternity. Like, imagine sitting in traffic long enough that you could have watched Titanic. That's what I've done. That's crazy. And in the beginning, you get angry at traffic. Oh, this is ridiculous. Oh. But after a while, you realize there's nothing you can do. And like a Zen acceptance floats down over you and blankets you in its warm embrace of indifference. So I don't hate the drive anymore. I can't. If I hated the drive, I would be miserable all the time. But what I do use it for is putting my thoughts together, because the traffic sometimes, it crawls. So you can drive with your brain turned off. So that's really where 91 Reasons was born. And the first idea that I had was that I was going to get a headset microphone and I was going to record the show on my drive. And however long the drive was, that would be the show. So if I got lucky and there was no traffic, it would be a 30-minute show. If I got stuck in traffic for 2 hours, it would be a 2-hour show. That turned out not to be feasible because I simply couldn't find the right equipment to record that was trustworthy. Because those of you who create, there's nothing worse than checking back on your creation and finding that it's gone. That's killer. I once lost 3 or 4 pages of one of my novels, and I thought I was going to kill somebody. Because you can't get those exact thoughts, phrases back. They're gone forever if you can't save them. And don't get me started on putting my novel away for a year and then trying to find it, and all the files but one were corrupted. Oh, that was terrifying. So there I am, stuck in traffic, sometimes for hours at a time, because I'm stupid, and it took me a while to adjust my work schedule so that I could avoid the traffic. It means leaving early and staying late, and that's just the way life is. Like I said, we're selling our house this summer, and I won't have this problem. But there I am, held captive by traffic on what? The 91 freeway. It's the dreaded 91 freeway, folks. The artery of Orange County here in California. So what better thing to call the show than 91 Reasons? Because 91 is the reason I thought of doing a show. So those of you who wanted the origin, there it is. And like a magician who reveals his tricks, I bet it wasn't as exciting as you thought it was going to be. Because I've heard people with their ideas. One guy's like, so you're going to do 91 episodes and that's it. No. Are you kidding? I've created my own digital virtual platform here. I may never come down from it. If I had time, I'd do an episode every day. This would be a daily show if it were up to me. It would take Rick West 10 years to catch up. Right? So that's the origin of the show. And so I've got a microphone. I recorded the Star Wars episode. I recorded the Back to the Future episode. I recorded Batman, VHS, Drunks. The Drunks was the real turning point because I wasn't sure it was going to work. I wasn't sure I could sit down and instead of talking about a movie, talk about something that really happened to me. But when I finished, I listened to it 3 times because I didn't know if I wanted to post it. I was really nervous. I was nervous about the whole affair. But here's what happened. I have listened to, and I'm not going to say I used to listen to, because even though the show, the podcast, Hollywood Saloon, is no longer in production, Andy and John were doing it. They were the pioneers of movie talk on podcasts, trust me. Not only were they probably the first, but the best that's ever been. I discovered them through Daniel. Yeah, check out Hollywood Saloon. Well, you know me, I'm a busybody. I added Andy on Facebook. I don't know him. I don't know him from Adam. But we sort of struck up a conversation one day about something completely innocuous. And we ended up becoming Facebook friends, you know. I've never met him. And, you know, I'd only heard his voice on podcasts, the Hollywood Saloon. I listened to some episodes 3 or 4 times. Their James Bond retrospective is some of the finest podcasting I have ever heard. Meticulously researched. And Andy meticulously, that word again, edited it together into a masterpiece. So when I had these episodes, I took a risk. And the risk was I asked Andy if he would listen to the first episode and if he would critique it. And you know what? I figured he'd say no. I figure he's probably too busy. I bet 1 million people ask him. And, you know, what if he said I was no good? What if he said not to do this? I don't know if I could take that kind of a rejection. I was surprised when he said, yeah, I'll listen to it, Jeff. Sure. Send it over. So I sent it over. And I didn't hear from him for a week. And I thought, oh my God, he hates it. He doesn't know how to tell me without hurting my feelings. And I wish he would just tell me that he hates it. Because if Andy from the Hollywood Saloon tells me he hates it, and that my particular style of using the movie as a launching pad for just talking about memories and good times and what it was at another time period, if he doesn't think that's good, or if that's a good enough hook for this show, I'll sell the microphone and I'll be done with this. And I really believe that. So I was out at the Rubidoux swap meet on a Wednesday. That's when they have their good swap meet. And Andy texted me and he said, hey, I listened to your show. And do you want me to be honest? And I was like, oh God, like, oh my God, I asked this girl to prom and she's changed her mind. Oh, it's the end of the world and I've spent all this money. I didn't know what to do. So I texted him back. I was like, hey, be as honest as you can, man, because a lot's riding on this, whether I do this or not. We're talking about episode 1. So, yeah, because what are the episodes? Star Wars, Back to the Future, Phantom Menace, Clone Wars. They're all, Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, all in a row. Because a good friend of mine, Kevin Gregg, heard me talking about Attack of the Clones one day. And he said, if I bring in my equipment, will you do that for a podcast? And I didn't really know what a podcast was. And I was like, sure, Kevin. Because Kevin had a really fun podcast where he just talked about what it was like to be a working actor. And Kevin has had many national commercials, so he knows what he's talking about. So for that Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones episode, I just regurgitated that conversation. The difference being there was nobody there to interrupt. Because the first time I did it, it was a room full of people, and everybody wanted to get in, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what the show is. My show's different. So there I am at the swap meet, I'm shopping, and I'm waiting for this text that is going to tell me whether I continue doing this or not. So the text comes through, and Andy tells me, he says, Jeff, a lot of people ask me to listen to their podcasts. You can imagine. I was like, yeah, Andy, I can imagine. You're the Godfather, so everyone wants you to give their blessing. I get that's what I'm asking for myself. He said, so many people do this, Jeff, that sometimes I listen to 2 or 3 minutes and I turn it off because it's awful. And I'm like, oh God, he's going to tell me he couldn't get past like minute 5. He says, Jeff, you're the podcaster I've been waiting for. You know how to tell a story. Most people cannot tell a story. You know how to keep the listener interested. And that's the hardest thing to do in podcasting. He says, you've got to keep doing those. And I was like, oh my God. Thank God. I got the Godfather's blessing. And it meant, and still does, means the world to me that he took time out of his life to listen to an hour and a half of me ramble about Star Wars. There was no theme music, no nothing. It was just raw audio, low volume. He probably had to crank it up to 11 to even hear it. But he did, and he liked it. So that gave me I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. So I spent the next few weeks, like I said, stockpiling episodes and trying to figure out how to get the show on iTunes, because that's one of the most technologically difficult things ever. It's technical. You got to do all this stuff. And you know what? For those who paved the way, who figured out how to do this on their own, I give it up for them. These people are geniuses, because to get your show on iTunes, you have to submit what the show is, the RSS feed, which means, I had to figure this all out, it means that iTunes doesn't store your episodes. They just make them available. So you have to store your episodes somewhere, and then you give them the RSS feed, which is like the roadmap on how to get it. So that figured out, and how those people did it in the beginning without podcast services, I don't know. So I just went looking for a lot of podcast services to try to find one that I understood, and B, that was going to, allow me to do what I wanted to do. So I found Podomatic, and I've been happy with Podomatic. I think if I had to do it all over again, I might have picked somebody else, only because they don't have enough storage. And those of you that have subscribed know that if I put a new episode up, it means another one gets taken down, because I've reached my limit of about 60 episodes, between 59 and 60, that they'll store. So I have to upgrade to the next level for them to store more episodes. But I'll get to that. I'll get to that eventually. But in the beginning, I was storing them on a Google Drive and trying to get an RSS feed out of that, and it wasn't working. But I got a voice out of the internet, a guy named Hendel that I've come to know quite well, and I knew Hendel peripherally from theme park events. Hendel was instrumental in spurring me on to do better, to get the episodes out, because when I posted them and I started a Facebook page and the whole bit, all that stuff that's free to try to drum up interest in it and to see if anybody was going to listen. And I was, like when you set up a yard sale and the first car stops, you're like, okay, this is going to work. Somebody's going to buy something. I'm going to make a few bucks. But instead it was, okay, somebody's listening to the episode. I hope they like it. I'm not going to make any money off it, but maybe they'll enjoy it, and I'll do some more episodes. So Hendel was I think the first guy to listen to these episodes that wasn't somebody I directly sent them to. He was plucking them off of the Google Drive. They weren't even on iTunes yet. And he was offering me all this advice on how to do all this stuff. And he's very technical minded, and I'm not. So he was instrumental in those early weeks. And we're talking July, late July. The goal was, I set another goal for myself. Once I decided I was going to commence with this, the goal was to get the shows on iTunes by hook or by crook before Comic-Con, so that when I went to Comic-Con, I could hand out 91 Reasons flyers and they would actually mean something, because if somebody picked it up and they looked on their phone, the show would come up. So getting Podomatic, getting the RSS feed, submitting to iTunes, being approved by iTunes, and then on my phone, bloom, 91 Reasons. Oh my God. It wasn't as big a deal as getting my novel in the mail, the first proof copy, but it was pretty darn close, folks. Making technology actually work for you, when it does, man, you're such a sense of satisfaction and like, oh my God, I did it. Oh my God, I did it. So right before Comic-Con, I had, I think, 2 or 3 episodes up, ready to go for anybody who wanted to listen. I wasn't burning down any, walls in the podcast community, but I was committed and I was doing it the way I wanted to do it. And that's important to me because, for a lot of the things I've worked on, I've been the co-writer. I've been the contributor. There's only been a handful of things in my professional life that have been all mine, that I claim full responsibility and or blame for. On The Hanging, I was co-writer. I was contributor. For some of the Dr. Cleaver shows, it was all me. Possessed, Unearthed, all me. And I wanted 91 Reasons to be all me. I'll bring guests on. I'll talk to anybody. I've got my improv buddy Jeff coming on to talk about my improv days. Rick West is going to come on at some point. He wants to talk about, I think, Las Vegas. That's going to be a lot of fun. But ultimately, 91 Reasons is my show. I pick the content. It's funny, too, because my wife, who started out telling me not to do it, has somehow, on occasion, tried to dictate what the content was. And I'm like, wait a minute. You didn't want me to bake this cupcake, and now you're telling me what toppings to put on it? Just relax. And God bless her. She's my wife, and she means well. And I'm happy that her and the kids have been on the show as much as they have, because I think it adds weight to the shows. Makes it feel like a family affair, which it certainly is. I've grown closer to my sons doing those Homestuck episodes than I have doing anything with them. Last night, Josie wanted to do Five Nights at Freddy's show, and I was like, well, of course. You want to talk to me for 20 minutes? About something you're passionate about? Absolutely. What parent would say no to that? So the idea of 91 Reasons and the reason that I created is actually working. And long after I'm gone, the episodes will live on for them, for my grandkids. Here's your crazy grandpa talking about stuff that happened many, many years before you were born. My legacy. My stupid legacy, this podcast. But I'm proud. I'm proud of it. Not only am I proud of the content of this show and what I've managed to do by hook or by crook, by me alone, but I'm also proud of what it means to the people out there. Because along with Hendel, I've picked up so many listeners and friends and people along the way that it is sometimes overwhelming that people are not only listening and not only understanding but connecting. And I've talked about receiving letters from people where they say, like, you're describing my childhood to a T. Oh my God, it's like you're speaking for me. That's humbling. That's, as Marty would say, that's heavy. To be able to reach and touch somebody like that with my stories of my growing up, that makes me feel fantastic. That makes it, every time I sit down to the mic, feel like it's worthwhile. Isn't that what everybody wants their job to be, worthwhile? This isn't my job, obviously. It's a hobby, but you get the idea. You get the idea. So it's been very humbling for people like Michael and Aaron and Albert and Jeremy and, gosh, so many people. Patrick. I'm going to forget people, and I apologize, but the show is, like I said, stream of consciousness. I've got some things on the computer here that I have to get out, but there's so many people who've made this show so successful just by supporting it, by listening and contributing online and meeting me in person. After I launched the show last summer, Hendel came up to me at Scare LA and had a whole conversation about which Star Wars movie was the worst. I was like, wow, people are listening and wanting to talk about it. And how the show morphs, you know. I was at work in December when that whole panty episode really happened, and I'm telling the story, and halfway through telling the story, I'm like, this is an episode. This is better than talking about what I buy at the swap meet. This is, you know, people can relate to this. And that was fun to do. And I've had people come up to my wife at functions and just immediately start talking to her about that episode. And I don't think she ever even listened to it. She didn't have to. She lived it. But I think that was Renee and Brett. But that's the power of the spoken word, you know. And how I said early on, this is the digital version of sitting around the campfire and telling stories. And as we talk about the milestone of 91 episodes, and do I have to do this again at 100? I don't know. But Hendel sent me a brand new microphone. I'm recording this show right now on Hendel's brand new microphone that he gave me in honor of 91 episodes. Michael, Aaron, and I think Diane, pardon me, because the thank you letter that came with another microphone that I got, I packed away because I didn't want to lose it. Because like I said, we're in the midst of moving. They sent me a microphone, and I've recorded on that one too. So I went from a crappy Maroon 5 microphone to having two beautiful brand new microphones with which to do this show. And like, how do you, is thank you like even enough? When somebody reaches out to you and honors you in that way, Each package of these that came in the mail, I was blown away. I was floored. I could not believe it. You know? Or the time I put our address out and said, send us a self-addressed stamped envelope for a business card, and Patrick put one in the next day. You know, the show touches people. And I'm so proud of that. You know, it's one thing to write some jokes that people think are funny. This is totally different. This is a relationship. We're having a relationship over the microphone. You know, my good friend Mark, who's worked Haunt with me, he told me he started talking to the radio one time. He thought he was me on the phone. He's talking to it. It's not a two-way conversation. He's having a conversation. Like, that's fantastic to me. That means it's working. That means when I've told you that I'm speaking to the invisible listener right here with me, that's coming across. And that's really cool. Really cool. So thank you to everybody who has supported this show in whatever way they had. And there are ways that people have supported the show. We have a Patreon page, and I couldn't be prouder of the people that have, honored me. I'm humbled by their generosity. David Carrero, Jeremy, Vriska, Robbie and Q11 TV, John Eastless, Eric Almada, David Markland, Michael Bondi, Patrick Winooski, Hendel, Sean Marshall from Parks and Cons, and Colleen. All people that took that step to support the show. And that's amazing. And Sean from Parks and Cons promotes the show in his own way. He's constantly retweeting. Rick West is constantly reposting. And I'm like, that's the greatest thing ever. You know, money's great, but also in addition to that is using your social media prowess to promote the show. It's so humbling to know that people want to help me be a success in this. That just makes me feel so great. That's why I'm gushing on and on. I use the show to promote my Kickstarter for my novels. And the people on there, they get books. On Patreon, you can get a shout out. You can tell me what movie to watch. You know, some of the best movie reviews have been because Michael Bondi has pledged enough to say, hey, watch this classic. I'm like, I'm going to face my fear and do a review of Ghostbusters, right? Kickstarter, we have John Eastless, that's familiar, Michael Bondi, Robbie DeVillas, Jeremy Lorman, Colleen, Rustlin, Chad, Christopher Glass, Rob Alvey from Theme Park Review, Dallas Alvey from Theme Park Review, Matthew Summers, Brian Fuchs, my good friend Aldo, him and his wife, Roxy, and his brother have supported the show so much. I wear a 91 Reasons vest everywhere that I go, courtesy of the talents of Aldo. And it's funny, as I'm packing my house up, he has given me so many beautiful embroidered pieces of art. I don't think I've ever stopped to say, hey, dude, your work is amazing, and thank you. Because before this vest, I had a 6th Key vest I wore everywhere. A 6th Key jacket and a Lost Station vest. And now I have this 91 Reasons one that the color and the artwork is so striking that people have come up to me at cons and said, what's the deal with your vest? Well, funny you should ask. So I thank him for that, you know. Patrick Winooski, he lives on the other side of the country. He's a fan of Season Pass, and he's become such a big supporter of the show. I have him to thank for sitting through the awful food fight movie, but it's all good. Becky Rivas, Trent Pollock, Paul Witcher, Henry Rebolerio, Albert Rodriguez, another theme park fan. I met Albert finally over spring break at Knott's Berry Farm for the Boysenberry Festival. Nice to meet him. His support means the world. And ML White, Crystal Cleary, and Sean Rader. And Sean Rader is such a fan of the show. His wife reached out to me to wish him a happy birthday, and I was happy to do that. I was like, well, sure, of course, that's cool. Of course I will. If it will mean something coming from me. Well, I guess if it means something from a stranger waiter at a restaurant, then I guess the guy you listen to in the car is good enough, right? So between Kickstarter and Patreon, we have so many people who just have opened themselves up to supporting the show, and it just makes me feel so like I'm just wowed. I am just wowed. So we have 397 people on the 91 Reasons Facebook page. We've been trying to get to 500, but it'll show up. We have 38 reviews on iTunes. Those are always great. They somehow mean something to iTunes. It's just great to hear people, especially young kids who are listening because of the Homestuck episodes, but they're also telling me that they listen to the other episodes too because it's pop culture and they're interested. So I think that's great. So we're reaching all sorts of people on 91 Reasons. The other thing that it didn't strike me as odd, but it struck me as it was a really good feeling was when you launch a podcast, like you think like, oh, I'm alone. I'm working in the dark of night and I have no map and no flashlight. And what you find is that so many of the people who have gone before you, who have done podcasts, are more than willing to offer their assistance, their guidance, in some cases, their equipment. So not only did Andy from the Hollywood Saloon give me all the guidance before I launched, but when I did launch, I heard from so many podcasters who just were happy that somebody else was doing a show. And instead of any kind of competition or rivalry, it was more like, hey, you're part of the family now. And that was such a good feeling, and so, like, I was so honored to have heard from so many podcasters, and they would tell me, like, we love your show, we listen all the time, and I'm like, because when you listen, when you do a podcast, it means that you're aware of podcasts, and if you're aware of podcasts, you listen to a lot. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, so instantly being part of that family and group was just, it was so neat, having Sean and Carmel from Parks and Cons they did an episode on podcasts, and mine was the first one they mentioned, like, we're listening to this 91 Reasons, which is so bizarre and we love it. And I'm like, wow, how great is that? I heard from The Sweep Spot, which is former Disney sweepers who do a podcast. I heard from, not only did I hear from Diz Geek podcast, but they wanted me to contribute to their show. And I was like, me? They're like, yeah, what you're doing is interesting. That's the ultimate compliment. I'm interesting. I'm somebody, like Navin Johnson. I'm in the phone book. The new phone books are here. So I gave them a little blurb, and it was really weird, like, being involved. And of course, Doug on Season Pass has been so helpful. Like, he wants to give me equipment to make my life easier, and that's just the ultimate. And Daniel from Diz Geek the guy built me a website. Now, I haven't launched it yet. I'm still, I've got my hands on my face in frustration because I'm not website illiterate. No, I am website illiterate. I'm not website literate. I'm illiterate when it comes to being literate. Does that make sense? But the guy built me a whole website, and I'm still trying to figure it out, how to host it, how to upload it. And he assures me that when I finally get it running, that it will be very easy to put content on it. So I couldn't be more humbled or grateful by every last bit of assistance I've had on this show, because ultimately it's just me talking into the void. And that's all well and good, but you have to figure out how to get that message from the void to the internet, which is a series of tubes, I'm told. So, having gone through this journey, and we're not even a year into it. You know, we're only on episode 91. We won't get to a year till near the end of July. So there's a road to go before we even get to a year. And I have people who tell me, like, I love your show, and oh my gosh, you update so often. I'm like, well, the beauty of this show is that I don't have to wait for anybody. I just have to be me. I just have to have a slice of time to sit down and tell you what's going on in my brain. And I've had a lot going on the last few days. Like, the fact that I'm getting this show out and hoping that it has the sentiment that I want it to have is a miracle, because I've got some weird things going on in my private life. You know, as a father and a creative person, there are two things that I hold sacred to me: my kids and my writing. And for the most part, I am impervious to insult. I am impervious to negative critiques. You don't like my work? That's fine. I'm not for everybody. I'm the first to admit that. But I've had, you know, people close to me whose opinions I respect trash something I created, and I feel hollow because of it. And I wasn't going to talk about it on the show, but the show's organic. The show goes where it's going to go. And I should be concentrating on positive of 91 episodes of 91 Reasons. But the lesson is, and this is a lesson for the show, if you're going to put yourself out there, you're going to get critiqued. There are people who are going to tell you what you're doing is terrible. There are people who told me that before I even started doing it. What you are thinking of doing is going to be terrible. But I've never let that stop me. I've never let, you're not following the pre-described rules, so what you're doing will not work. Well, who cares what the rules are? Who cares? On the Autopia of life, my car would have no guide rail. I would be free to drive anywhere I want. I would drive that Autopia car into Tomorrowland. To Tomorrowland proper. You know, I would knock the big stupid water. Is that ball still there? I don't know. I've not focused on Tomorrowland in a long time. But that, you know, that big ball that's got water around it that kids play on, I would knock it into Red Rocket's Pizza Port, just like in Fight Club. That would be my contribution. But you get what I'm saying, right? You get what I'm saying, that... There's my phone going off. I'm sorry, I should turn that off. Let me just, you know what, I'm going to turn my phone off while I'm on the show here, because we're doing something here and we can't be interrupted. Now it's making noises when it turns off. So the podcast community welcomed me in, and not only did they welcome me in, but a lot of them got on and left me reviews on iTunes. And I think that just says so much for the podcast community, that because everybody's show is different, everybody's got a different angle, a different take, we're not really in competition with each other. Everybody's doing their own thing. My show being bizarre, I don't really have guests, you know, but a couple of times. It's just me rambling into the microphone. But I've gained a clearer picture of who I am as a person by doing this show, by peeling back the top of my head and scooping out all of the things that make me, me. you do learn a lot about yourself. One of the chief things you learn doing a show like this is the discipline of it. If I don't sit and talk into this microphone and make the time, there won't be a show. And there are days, folks, I don't want to do it. There are days I hem and haw. I look like a crazy person. I set everything up. I get it ready to record. And then I get up and I leave. And I go to the bathroom. Get a drink of water. Go to the bathroom again. Get a drink of water. Sit down. Stare at it. Start. Stop. Redo it. Start again. And then finally just decide, if I don't do this, I won't have an episode. But if I do it, and I think I've said this before, if I do it, I'll have an episode to last forever. A moment in time captured. Like a digital picture that's never going to go away. Like a politician's Twitter feed. So, it's been a strange trip from an Adam Levine microphone to the amazing Yeti microphone I'm using now. Courtesy of somebody who listened to the show and wanted to make it better. That's so amazing to me. And it's not even the only one. I have another one right here. So you can hear it in my voice how grateful I am for everybody's support on this show and taking it to heart and wanting to talk about it, you know? Because I don't have that very much with my novels. I have a few people that contact me and want to talk about my books. Most people read them, I supported Jeff, I bought his book, thanks. And that's fine. You get whatever you get out of it is what you get out of it. And there's no judgment call there. But when you're talking about day-to-day activities and day-to-day experiences, the way I do on this show, people do want to talk about it. The panties episode gets mentioned almost everywhere I go. People who worked at Blockbuster want to talk to me. People who like the same movies that I like or hate the same movies that I hate, or vice versa, who tell me I'm crazy. Your opinion's crazy. That's fine. Whatever gets things going, right? Whatever adds to, not takes away from. And my wife is the one who taught me that this show needs to add to, not take away from. She stopped me from doing the one negative episode I was going to do. And that might have, altered the course of this show. And made it, like, I have to imagine that when you're listening, your kids are in the car with you. God knows they're bored to tears listening to this guy ramble on about the good old days. But every once in a while, I hit upon something that's interesting to everybody. It sparks the imagination. It stimulates the conversation. And that's all we're here for. That's what the show is. I am preaching from the pulpit of pop culture. And it's something that I've done at parties ever since I was 10. But now we're in the digital age, and I can beam my sermons all over the world. And we do have listeners all over the world for my episodes and the Homestuck episodes. And I'm really honored at that. And as we're on the precipice here of episode 91, it feels great. 91 episodes of 91 Reasons. And we're not showing any signs that they are slowing. The rowers keep on rowing, so the danger must be growing. Right? And when am I going to get to that movie? Soon. When am I going to get to my dad's show? Soon. When am I going to talk about the drunks again? Soon. When am I going to talk about the hillbilly house I lived in on Beach Boulevard? Oh, soon. But I'm also looking at having more guests. And I just had a friend contact me about talking to somebody I admire, oh my God, immensely. And you'll know when I have that person on the show, if I can make that happen. You'll know. You'll be like, oh my God, Jeff, you can barely talk, you're geeking out. And that'll be pretty cool. So we're not slowing, folks. Not with these keen new microphones. We can't. Because now you can hear me even clearer than before without my Chinese $2 windscreen and my $40 Target microphone. But everybody's got to start somewhere. Lucas started making movies with a little tiny camera. So eventually I'll be able to do special editions of all these episodes and add in Jar Jar and spaceships and all kinds of things. I'm talking it really fast. So, at some point we got to wrap this up. It's a self-indulgent episode. It's an episode talking about the episodes. It's meta. It's 91 Reasonception. The top is spinning. Is it? I don't know. So, I tried to thank all the people who are so into this show. Garrett, who I met at Walmart, who sells DirecTV systems. James at the park, who follows me around and listens to it. All the people. Greg, Sir Clinks a lot, who reposts everything that I put. Rick and Johanna from Theme Park Adventure. Rob Alvey, who was there at the beginning of my podcasting ideas and loves to repost the stuff that I put up. There's so many people. So many people. And I know I'm going to miss a few. But that's what another episode's for. So if I missed you, let me know on the Facebook page, and we'll give you a heads up on another episode. Who cares? We got plenty more episodes. They're falling out of my pockets, these episodes. One just ran under the couch. So to everyone who's listening and downloading and telling their friends and opening up a time box or supporting the show by donating money or equipment or time or whatever, or karma, everybody here, i.e. me, wants to say thanks. And we hope that the episodes continue to entertain you for what they're supposed to do. I mean, they're just an hour and a half of frivolity, background noise. I am finally become background noise, and it's all I ever wanted to be. Right? To Adrian Romo, who takes me to task at the top of the Matterhorn. To Mark Scoggins, who has followed me through the fires of the mazes. And Jeff Whiteman, the same. And all the people entrapped. Too many to mention. Who followed my crazy ideas and didn't flinch when I asked them to do the craziest things. So I have so many people in my life that understand I've surrounded myself with creativity. And I'm so honored by that. That's all you could ever want. We should all just buy a town and live in a town. Name it Creativity. Creativity USA. And the sidewalk will be painted like Candyland. And you can buy your groceries with stories and jokes and anecdotes. Doesn't it sound like a great place to be? Where all the arcade games are set to free play, and the Starbucks is always open. And the Toys R Us always has the figures you're looking for. See, now I'm really fantasizing. If you find yourself surrounded by negativity, it's time to get out. And I choose to surround myself with positivity and creative people who look at challenges and rub their hands and go, I can't wait to tackle that. That's the key to life, folks. So thanks to everybody who's listening, downloading and everything. Thanks to my family who's put up with me prattling on and on about Batman and Robin in the middle of the night. And Homestuck every Wednesday night. And my daughter who wanted to do a Five Nights at Freddy's show, so we did. To the heroes of radio that I've listened to for years. Howard Stern, John and Ken, Tim Conway Jr., Phil Hendry. All the greats, man. All the icons that you look up to. Happy Harry Hardon from Pump Up the Volume. Right? Talk hard. We got to wrap this show up. No plugs at the end. The only plug is to you, the listener. We want to thank you for downloading, for supporting, and for enjoying the show I like to call 91 Reasons.
We don't need a reason for anything we feel. We don't need a reason because souls at the wheel. So roll this top down, hell with this town, leave our feelings behind. We don't need a reason, 'cause I got you and you got me tonight.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
Testing. For God's sakes, let me email this to myself.